And here we are for this will be, I think, this might be episode 10, just or session 10. Just looking at it, yeah, this is our 10th one of these. Look at that. So
We need to have a party.
yeah, so this is the 10th Q and A session where I come up with these weird random topics, and hopefully people come out and listen to me ramble and ask questions. This week or this month, week, whatever, we're doing Greek and Roman mythology. Um, my AI generated background for this is all based on Ray Harryhausen characters and movies, because Jason and the Argonauts and Clash of the Titans were like my introduction to myth. That's what mythology was when I was a kid. Also, the animated '60s Hercules cartoon, where he basically turns into Shazam, and he has to put on his ring of power and say Hercules or Olympia to gain his powers. I don't know if anybody remembers that or knows that. I can
Mhm.
show clips, but
That
yeah. So tonight is going to be a lot more loosey goosey than normal. I'm going to count on some audience participation because there was a whole lot of requests for Odyssey stuff, and I didn't even get to finish the movie. I'm sorry. I tried watching.
great movie.
I got the first 45 minutes in, but I just didn't have time. But there's some interesting things compared to the play, or compared to the poem versus the movie already in that first 45 minutes. So, but what I'm going to do for the most part for the beginning is talk about ancient mythology, Greek and Roman mythology, and this will be more or less a version of what I would have taught my class. So you're actually going to get apologies if anybody has watched any of my older Greek and Roman myth videos. You're going to get some of my jokes again. I'm not terribly original, and some of my ideas will make a reappearance. But
Like your jokes.
sorry, what was that?
We like your jokes.
Ah, there you go. Excellent.
Some of us.
They get better as the night goes on.
Yeah, because although right now I am drinking a cold brew because it is fuck off degrees outside, and I've been just dragging ass all day, and I needed some caffeine. I wanted to be animated for everybody instead of what I was feeling all day, which is I just rather be in a nap. But maybe the whiskey will return, and I'll start swearing. Okay, do I just turn that on? There we go. So, I always like to start things with a little bit of etymology, and mythology is one of those words where um, the origin really tells you a lot about how it was thought of, but that changed as over time when it gets incorporated into English. So mythology comes from two different Greek words. Mythos is the first one, and that's um, stories. Um, it actually they put the so yeah, narrative fiction or speech is what they gloss it here as, and then logia, which is knowledge of. And when you combine them together, it's kind of knowledge of stories, or more colloquially, storytelling. And that's what mythologia meant in ancient Greek was storytelling, the ability to kind of um, render out stories. And generally, these were stories about gods and heroes and monsters and so on, um, but not exclusively featuring human casts. That's kind of the idea. Stories about the supernatural. You might kind of give a different definition to it. Over time, when that word was eventually incorporated into English, what it got associated with, because we had changed, we were not ancient Greece anymore, we were at the time. I mean, the time mythology got into English in the 17th century. So this is kind of the time of the Enlightenment, or at the very least, rationalism is taking hold. And before that, of course, it's it's a Christian society, not ancient Greek society. And so mythology, when it gets incorporated in English, gets associated with an idea of fake, an idea that like the thing you're talking about is not real, and so you almost don't have to worry about it. And then over time, there was some subtlety added to that meaning, where mythology almost kind of starts to be associated with like children's tales, like it's only suitable for kids because they are, these fake stories that people talk about. But another thing that happens is as Europeans go around the world and they encounter other cultures that have pantheons very different from what they've got, they start labeling everybody else as having a mythology. And so there is Japanese mythology, there's Chinese mythology, there's Indian mythology, or Indian mythology, depending on which continent they're talking about. And oh, sorry, this should work. Um, and so, sorry, it was just a request for an invite. So the word, it keeps this kind of fake association, and then it also gets applied to these other kind of belief systems and storytelling traditions. And so there's this inherent bias when talking about these other people's narratives as like, well, we know they're fake because we've already labeled them as mythology. Um, and so I generally, I mean, you can't change reality. Mythology has a bit of fake kind of on it, but I really, really like the term, and so I just want everyone to know that when I use the term here, I'm really kind of echoing back to its more ancient origins, where I'm talking about just literal storytelling about supernatural things, not with none of the emphasis on, oh yeah, and it's also fake, or any kind of like potential that like, oh, it's just for children, or these sorts of things. And I find that because it's a good word for describing the tradition of storytelling about kind of supernatural activities. So it's it's useful. And there's already a tradition of talking about like Norse mythology, and the Japanese mythology, Chinese all of these things. And rather than change that habit, I'd rather just recognize that the word doesn't have to imply bad things about it. So okay, as Christian. Oh, I see you posted twice. Gotcha. Sorry, I didn't notice the first time. Um, any questions before I after that weird kind of spiel? Oh, okay. If you do have questions, feel free to just blurt them out. I when I'm looking here, like my Discord's over here, so I'm not actually looking at Discord. And DMs work. I get an audit, like I get a Badoop, but they're a bit distracting. So it's just better to just kind of like blurt it out if you want. Just say, hey, I got a question, and go ahead and ask it. It's always okay, always okay to ask a question, because it might lead to like a diversion of 20 minutes, and it'd be nice to take up 20 minutes, just in case I don't have any materials prepared. But okay, moving on. So, mythology in the Greek and Roman world is initially exclusively told using as oral storytelling. What this means is that you don't share books. People share stories, and people can travel from area to area sharing stories, or you might have in your village or in your town or city or what have you, storytellers that this is what they do, or just somebody knows one of those stories really well, and so when if you want to hear book 7 of the Odyssey, you ask Bob, because he's got that one down pat, sort of thing. And in an oral storytelling tradition, there's a few things that kind of come to the forefront. One of them is that variation happens a lot. Broad things are preserved, especially if it's important in the tradition to preserve them. So it's not always necessary in a tradition to get things exactly correct on repetition over and over and over again. Sometimes in a tradition, variation is not only accepted but encouraged. So with oral storytelling, variation happens either through mistake or through purposeful alteration of the source material. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that, like I mentioned, it kind of falls on specific people. So you might get a specialist in your town, or you might get just a local that happens to know some stories. So it's kind of a restricted group of people that go around retelling these stories. And at this point in time, it's not because anyone has restricted them. It's just that not everyone can spend the time to memorize these tales and retell them. We can actually tell, even if we have the written form, because that's what we have. We have written forms of all these ancient stories of gods and heroes from Greece and Rome. We can tell which ones were the version that we have, whether it was originally made orally, like composed orally, or composed to be written down. And there's just several traits that come to the fore. And one of them is um, epithets. So these are like nicknames that people get. And trying to think of like Homeric epithets. Quick-witted Odysseus. So you don't just say Odysseus, you say quick-witted Odysseus. On the one hand, this when you're trying to memorize, thousands upon thousands of lines of a poem, this helps in that memory. It's like almost a mnemonic device. But it also, these different epithets work with the meter to help fill out the poetry. I'm not a very good poet. I'm, in fact, quite bad at even trying to get the sound of something. I have no music in me. And so I have to trust others when they talk about meter and understanding kind of the flow of long and short vowels and so on and so forth. It doesn't compute with me. But yeah, so we find like these they're kind of relics of oral storytelling in written form. And so we know that, okay, the version that we're dealing with, even though we have the written form of it, we know that it was originally composed in as an oral tradition, or comes from an oral tradition. There are written books that emulate that style, and so it's not just that there's epithets. I should kind of caution. It's not just that they say quick-witted Odysseus, or what's one for Achilles? I can't think of. Okay, like hot-tempered Achilles or something like that, because Achilles is always just blowing his top and killing people. It's not just the fact that it has these epithets. There's other factors that kind of go into it that we can tell that it's oral storytelling. But sometimes in written forms, they'll want to sound not necessarily like it was orally transmitted, but that it's old school. Sorry, is that a question? No, okay. So they'll add epithets to a written work, and because it doesn't have the other factors that I can't remember right now, otherwise I wouldn't be so vague. Um, then we can say, okay, they're just purposefully, the term is archaizing. They're purposely trying to make it sound archaic or old school. And that's, I mean, that's a tradition that exists to this day. If you whenever somebody tries to use Shakespearean language in everyday speech, they're purposefully archaizing for maybe comedic effect or to sound smart or any possible reason. Any questions so far? We're good. Alrighty. So who are the folks that do this transmission? In ancient Greece, they are called a rhapsode. And interesting anecdote, when I was in first year university taking ancient Greek for the first time, and when you do an ancient language course, they start you off relatively easy with short passages, and they provide for you at the bottom a glossary of words. And I was doing the classic problem, the classic bad way of trying to read things, of assuming that what I was looking at was English in code, and I was just looking down for what the translated word meant, and I was just going to plop it in, and then I could understand. Obviously, that would just make it make sense, but that's not how translation works, and so on. But the word rhapsode was in my first reading, and it was rhapsode, and then the description of it was a rhapsode, and I had no idea what the hell a rhapsode was, and I did not think that that was an English word that people had used, and so I asked my teacher. I'm like, so it says rhapsodos is the Greek word. It says rhapsodos is a rhapsode. What is a rhapsode? And I don't know if I can communicate exactly the look that she gave me, but think of it like she felt like she had to explain to me the word blue or sky. It was so self evident to her what a rhapsode was. She couldn't understand how a fully grown adult didn't know what a rhapsode was and just laughed at me. So that was a great introduction to ancient Greek. Um, what she should have said, and what that textbook should have said, is that a rhapsode is a storyteller. They are itinerant storytellers. They go from town to town. They are professionals. They get paid for their work, or you might think of them actually as like a busker, like a street performer today, where they're going around from village to village or town to town, and they know classics. They know stories that people like to hear. Maybe they've composed some of their own, and they make a living kind of retelling these stories in the most evocative way possible, as entertainment for people. They are entertainers. And so this is the kind of professional way that these mythological stories would be transmitted in the Greek and Roman world. It didn't have to be through a rhapsode. You could, like I mentioned before, someone in your community could know book 9 of the Odyssey. They could know book 9 like the back of their hand. And so if you ever wanted to hear book 9, you got Bob good and drunk and then asked him to recite it for you. And yeah, but rhapsodes are the official method of transmission. Let's see what they got here for. This is 18th century, I think. And which one are they saying is the rhapsode? Presumably, it's the guy in costume, but yeah, I'm not sure, to be perfectly honest. Oh wow, that's great. Okay, so any questions so far? No. Okay. So we mentioned that Greek gods are like supernatural elements are the source, or the what is talked about in mythology. And so, really, what does that mean? Because I mean, everyone's heard of like a god or two or 10 or whatever, but like, there's a lot. There's lots and lots and lots, and they also have like complex relations with each other. Sometimes brother and sister, sometimes mom and dad relations, and that's kind of gross. Or not mom and dad, mom and son, or father and daughter. Um, and so, really, kind of like, what are the main groupings? The most popular, the most common grouping of gods in the ancient Greek world are known as the Olympians. And that's because they live on Mount Olympus and they are led by Zeus. I'm just going to click on the 12 Olympians here. I was really hoping it would. Oh, okay, here we. So the the we have this idea. Okay, there are 12 Olympians, but throughout history, that has not always held true. Sometimes, so it's, like it says right here, there is no single canonical list of 12 Olympian gods. The 13 gods and goddesses, along with their Roman counterparts, most commonly considered to be one of the 12, are listed below. So almost always you're going to find Zeus, his wife Hera, and his brother Poseidon. Like that trifecta, you're going to find that in the Olympians. They live on Mount Olympus. Hera, I think, also is incidentally his sister. Yes, sister wife of Zeus. So, yeah, these gods don't exactly present ideal living. And then other gods and goddesses. So Demeter is goddess of grains and fertility. She's another daughter of these two characters here, Kronos and Rhea. Apollo is a sun god. In this version, they're saying he's son of Zeus and Leto, but he has, I think, multiple, depending on the author, multiple origins. Artemis is daughter of Zeus and Leto, and twin sister of Apollo. Ares is the god of war. Oh, he is okay. Second generation, son of Zeus and Hera. So anyway, I tend not to focus too much on just listing names and relations and so on. I just want to bring attention that we see this Kronos and Rhea a lot, and we've got like sons and daughters of Kronos and Rhea. So if we go back to our list of God, I actually don't. Do they? They don't talk about the Titans. So one of the things in Greek mythology that we see from different authors is there's generations of gods, and the the transition from who's in charge from one generation to the next is actually violent, like really really violent. Um, and this is we've got the Titans, who were the generation before the Olympians, and several of the Olympians are the kids of Titans. And the Olympians, in order to kind of take their place as the primary gods, they have a war with the Titans. It's called the Titanomachy. And various Titans are banished or killed. Um, some Titans survive. I think Prometheus. Um, oh, okay, yeah, certain. Oh, these are children of Titans. Prometheus. I mean, everyone's a child of the Titans. So, anyway, the point of this, without trying to get too confusing, and I apologize, I think I've already gotten too confusing, is there is a lot of gods, and they have very complex interrelations, and these complex interrelations exist in our earliest versions of our stories about these gods. And I'm going to go into one of these earliest versions. The gods have always been, as far as we can tell, complicated and have just really, really crazy stories attached to them. And society flouting aspects to them. So, brothers and sisters having children, murdering, murdering your own father or murdering your own children. So the parents of the Titans is there's actually another generation older. The father is Uranus or Uranus, and he is husband to the Earth. He gives birth to the Titans, and he tries to eat them. He's not happy with having kids because there's a prophecy that they'll overthrow him. And guess what? They do. And then the children that he has, so the Titans, the head of the Titans is Kronos. And guess what? He tries to eat his kids too. Like straight up, just no discussions, no conversations. And it didn't work for Dad. Why do you think it would work for you? But anyway, he also hears of a prophecy that our kids are going to overthrow us, and so there's an attempt to eat the children as well. I may have got that confused. I thought Uranus was equated with Saturn. I may have gotten my oh yeah, Kailas. He tries to eat at least one kid. I know that, but I may have got my generations mixed up. Either way, they do fucked up shit. And these are in our earliest stories for the gods, and so the gods have always done crazy stuff in Greek and Roman mythology. There are thoughts that maybe they are illustrating the supernatural people can flout these traditions, but as an example of normal people are not allowed to do that. Or something I've always thought about is they're actually modeling elite behavior. So like kings and queens figure they can do this stuff, but like normal people aren't allowed to do it. I don't know how accurate that is because it's still pretty gross. But we do know that there are some how to phrase this. Some dynasties in the ancient world considered themselves to have divine bloodlines, and so they try to keep things all in the family. The Ptolemies of Egypt are the kind of most infamous. This is where Cleopatra comes from, the famous Cleopatra. But anyway, we've got gods. We've got just gods everywhere. So many different kinds of gods as part of our mythological stories. We also have heroes. And heroes they're called heroes. The word in English, hero, that we have comes from ancient Greek, and it comes from the word used to describe these kind of demigods. Some of them might be full gods, but maybe they started as humans. And over time, we've got here the Heroon, a kind of cult of heroes develops in ancient Greece, and we have monuments built to heroes. And sometimes we think that these were actual real people that over generations were mythologized and turned into gods. Evidence is very weak for this, but it just, it's a possibility. And there's actually precedent in other mythological traditions. In ancient Mesopotamian mythology, the figure of Gilgamesh, most people actually believe he was a real king and he just got mythologized over time. And in fact, the stories about Gilgamesh um, mirror a lot of stories that are told about Hercules. Not not the stories are the same, but what am I trying to say? Initially, a lot of the stories about Gilgamesh were just disconnected, random stories, and they just sort of piled up over time. I saw Gilgamesh lift a house once, and Gilgamesh was able to, divert a river, or all of these things, and they are individual, self-contained little anecdotal stories about Gilgamesh, and then eventually, over centuries, they get collected into what we now have is the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is a broad narrative with a start and a finish, and a whole bunch of events that were pulled from these individual stories and put into it. And that's exactly what happened with the labors of Hercules. If you've heard of the 12 labors of Hercules, well, in the ancient world, there were just Hercules just did stuff. Sometimes it was awful. He killed his wife and child. Um, and that's the impetus for okay, now you have to go on and do these labors as penance. But Hercules is everywhere and doing all kinds of things. He's in the Iliad and the Odyssey. um, Odysseus meets Hercules in the underworld, and he's like, "Hey, bro, how's it going?" Like, "Oh, just broing around." Hercules is kind of like the ancient most broest bro. Um, yeah, that's probably the best way to put it. But he may have been a real person who was kind of mythologized over time. Um, but these other characters, so Odysseus, the hero of the Odyssey, is a Greek hero. Achilles is a Greek hero, and Theseus. We have hundreds upon hundreds of heroes. Um, Largely, these are individuals that feature in the epic poetry of, and I'll just get into this, Homer or Hesiod. Um, and we actually call the time period that they operate in. It's also known as the heroic age because it's the time when heroes kind of like trode the earth. Because by the time of what we think of when we say ancient Athens, that's a very specific period in time. By that time, heroes no longer exist in the real world. People just tell stories about heroes and put up monuments to heroes, but there are no new heroes kind of coming about, and heroes don't walk the earth at the time. That was in the heroic age, a time kind of in the past. Um, so, apologies, that was a little more confusing than I was hoping for it to be. But does anybody have any questions based on all the gobbledygook that I just kind of talked about? No? All right.
Nope.
Okay.
Um,
Well, we'll just move on.
Sean, I joined a bit late there. Um, is there a particular time period when the stories start to consolidate? And you said new heroes are not being created in the same way. Is there a time period when this starts to kind of formalize a bit?
Yes, and it's exactly what you have anticipated where I'm going next.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to start talking about next is the transition from oral transmission to written transmission, our first authors, and so on and so forth. So I probably will answer any follow-up questions you have by going into that, but did you have any other kind of immediate questions based on anything?
Nope, just that.
All right. Well, okay. Let's move into the next section. So I've kind of vaguely mentioned Homer. Homer may have been a real person. Um, if you ask me, I don't think Homer was a real person. Just to be perfectly blunt, um, I don't. I don't have perfect evidence for that.
Pretty sure he's yellow and lived in Springfield.
I mean
Just throwing it out there.
that is fair. That is fair.
Thank you.
Yep. Which Springfield though?
We were all thinking it.
I don't think it was a mistake that they named him Homer. I think
Springfield,
it was
Massachusetts, the one that I'm in right now.
yeah. Okay.
It was Ohio.
I was anyway.
There's a joke in the Golden Girls about we'll move it like someone's in the witness protection program. We'll move to Springfield. Which Springfield? Aha! There you go.
Yeah, there's one in every state, I think.
That's funny.
There's a little bit of Homer in all of us, is the lesson.
Yeah. So why would I doubt? Because I mean his two famous works, the Iliad, which details the Trojan War, and it details the the reason it's called Iliad is another name for Troy. Troy was Ilius, and so it's the story about the thing about Troy. And the Odyssey, and that's named for Odysseus, the thing about Odysseus. And both of those are attributed to Homer, and they have been attributed to Homer since the ancient world. So why would I say, well, he doesn't actually exist? We know based on the features present within both of these epic poems that they were composed orally. And when we know that, what that means is that they could have been circulating for centuries, and would have no singular author. So,
Not to cut you off, what would be like? What's a trigger or something that you see that it shows that it was oral first before written?
so this is where I was discussing the epithets. So quick-witted Odysseus, or what was what I said for Achilles, like hot-tempered Achilles or something like that.
Yeah, I got that, but like, how can we know from like those texts? Like, is there like certain verbiage and anything? So it's like the quick-witted Achilles, and that translated over, and that's what makes it like that's one of our key
That's-
sources that says that it's written, or that it was oral to written.
That is one of, and it was the only one that I could think of at the time because I couldn't remember the other ones. But one of the ones that I've just remembered now is phrase repetition. So it's along the similar lines to the epithets, where you use the epithet over and over and over again. So it's a mnemonic device to help you kind of figure out where you are in your lines of poetry.
For memorization and everything, yeah.
Yeah, and then there's also just full on straight up line memorization, like where they will repeat the same kind of two lines of poetry over and over and over again, as you move down, and it's less to memorize, but it's also easier to fill out. Like, you already know the meter, and you already know that it's going to fit.
It's like a refrain in a song.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, oral transmission is singing. It's like you would kind of poetry was delivered to a rhythm. There are others. I don't remember what they are right now. This was never one of my fields of study, so I do apologize. My knowledge is just not strong enough. But there are factors that tell us it was composed orally and later written down. And when something is orally transmitted, it might be a year old, but it might be 200 years old. And there's very little in the poetry itself to tell us exactly when it was composed, but it does lean towards the when we have our first attestations of it being written down. So maybe Homer was a guy. Maybe he wrote it. Or the thing that I favor the most is if Homer was a real person, he was either the person who first wrote it down or the person who gave the poem to the person who wrote it down. Like he was the last link in the chain, and kind of added whatever he added last to it. Um, that's my thinking on it. Is he either wrote it down or was that last link in the oral transmission? Either way, oh
Can I ask a quick question there, Sean?
yeah, of course.
So going back to the hero idea, because Homer is sort of, I mean, at least today, we think of him as a literary hero, this figure of Homer. Is he possibly also somewhat a mythological figure himself as being the author of these two great epics when it, could actually be several people who contributed bits and pieces to all of this story? Is he kind of a centralized, held up hero himself?
Not in the same way as actual Greek hero cult or Greek heroes like the ones from the stories of Homer. Um, I I'm not aware of any cult activity being expressed for Homer. Doesn't mean it never existed. Just I'm not aware of it. I think he's always when he's always revered firmly as a man, without
Okay.
the
No
supernatural kind of extra powers.
demigod, no demigod
Yeah,
component or anything. Okay.
yeah. He very
Gotcha.
easily could have transitioned, but
Yeah, you brought up a good point. Could you look at the Iliad and the Odyssey, not to get off topic, but more as like the stories of the Bible, more or less, just
oh,
in a different context?
they exactly are. So, one of my instructors for I took an undergrad degree in early Christian writing, and he would always refer to the Iliad and the Odyssey as narrating Greece's epic history, and then he would refer to what Christians call the Old Testament, or what academics call the Hebrew Bible, as Israel's epic history or Judaism's epic history, and they are performing almost identical functions in terms of listing deities. In the case of the Hebrew Bible, it eventually comes out to one, but major components of the Hebrew Bible are written when that's ambiguous or there's more than one. Regardless, there's conflict between supernatural powers, and Yahweh comes out on top. But either way, you list the deities, you list heroes. Um, David is absolutely, if like I'm unaware of if in ancient Israel if they developed a hero cult. I don't think so. But if that was part of their tradition, if that was something that they were wont to do, David would have been up there with Hercules, like 100%. Samson, or it's not Samson. Uh, no, my brain has just lost all. If you know any kind of like any of the heroes from the Hebrew Bible, um,
Moses, Abraham.
yeah, there you go, Moses and Abraham. They would be even an upper echelon of heroes because of their role in the kind of the formation of the kingdoms, right? So that's spot on as an observation, Dolly. Any other questions on or if anyone? It's okay to take diversions. That's what this is all about. This is a very informal setting, so ask away if you have other questions. Oh, okay. Well, just shout it out if something comes to mind. Um. So, Homer, oral transition. the world of, so the Iliad, as I said, narrates the Trojan War, and the Odyssey is Odysseus' journey home from the Trojan War. These were likely written down in. Yeah, I was pondering whether I was going to talk about the time periods. I'm going to talk about the time periods here. These were written down in the very beginning of what's called the Greek Archaic Age, or Archaic Greece. So this starts around 800 BC, and it is when ancient Greece, as we know it in common everyday understanding, is starting to form in the form that we're familiar with. Athens and Sparta at each other's throats, a series of city-states all along Greece, eventual war with the Persians, these sorts of things. There was a Greek society that existed before that. This is Mycenaean Greece. So technically, the narrative of both the Iliad and the Odyssey it's taking place in the mythological past. It's taking place in an era of heroes. And by the time of archaic Greece, heroes are no longer being made. Or the rate of production of heroes has slowed dramatically. Maybe a few of them are created in the archaic period, but like we're really cutting it down. This is approaching what the authors who were writing at the time what they would consider the modern day for them, and heroes were not a product of the modern day. Heroes happened in the ancient past. And so almost always when people say they want to see a historically accurate adaptation of the Iliad or the Odyssey, what they mean by that is they want to see something that was from Bronze Age Greece or Mycenaean Greece. And there are a few things that we understand based on, there's a writing system for Mycenaean Greece called Linear B, and we've deciphered those tablets, and we understand a few things about the economy and political structure of Mycenaean Greece. And if anybody, like the broad strokes of, I'm just going to go over the broad strokes of the Iliad. I think most people understand that somebody's wife was stolen, and they went to war to go get the wife back. That's sure. But in the poem, it tells us that it's, oh God, it's his brother. Why can I not think of? It's not Menelaus. It's Agamemnon. It's the wife of Menelaus who is Agamemnon's brother. And so Agamemnon is this like big war chief in the Iliad, and we actually understand, based on how Mycenaean Greece was structured and things we've translated and understand, that there was independence of all of the local kind of warlords, but that they could form, for like a particular war, they could form under like an overking, and that the term for that was Wanax. And if I'm not mistaken, Wanax is in, like the term Wanax is in the Iliad for describing Agamemnon's role. So there are, but like Wanax is not a term that gets used in archaic Greece. So there are like these little tidbits that survive from the Mycenaean period. There's also a description of a boar's head helmet, and they didn't have boar's head helmets in archaic Greece, but they did in Mycenaean Greece. But that doesn't, I mean, they could have just seen a boar's head helmet. They could have dug open a grave and seen a helmet. So it's hard to tell. But that's it. Like everything else that's described either is just straight up made up or makes more sense in the archaic period. So what that means is there really is no historically accurate Iliad because it already mashes together 500 years of history and then throws in a bunch of mythology for good measure. But this is, at least in epic poetry, this is the era of heroes. This is the age of heroes, is the Bronze Age or the late Bronze Age and Mycenaean Greece. Unfortunately, we don't have descriptions of, Hercules traipsing across the Greece, or Achilles, or uh, Odysseus. We do have some heroes named in some tablets in Mycenaean Greece, but most of our, like, we don't have a whole lot of poetry and just like narrative stuff. Most of the things that we have from Mycenaean Greece are like tax records. As depressing as that sounds, it's like, and I extracted 14 bushels of wheat in tribute from so and so. They're paid up for the month. I don't need to ransack their house or anything like that. Moving on. And that's just the nature of what the record keeping was. When we have these tablets, we have these linear B tablets, because eventually the palaces that they were in got burnt down, and it was the kind of like tax records room that had these copies of these tablets, and when it burned, it baked the clay and preserved it to the modern day for us to excavate. Presumably, they had all kinds of literature. They just didn't keep it in the tax room, and it may have been written on papyrus, which wouldn't have preserved through a fire. And we know that they had trade with Egypt, so who knows? But this time period here, the Bronze Age, would have been at least what archaic Greece thought was the age of heroes. Kind of similar, if you think about it, to um, when the Middle Ages starts talking about, like, you know, eras where there were dragons. This is one of the things that I got interested in when I wanted to start studying history. Um, I wanted to know, okay, when did people think there were dragons? And how plausible is it that there were, dragons and monsters and so on and so forth? And it's really, it's the what I would call the first years after the late Roman period. The kind of the collapse of the Roman West, and it's like, oh, so really what it was is there was widespread loss of writing, and if you can't fill it in with written histories, there be dragons, and it just must have been dragons there roving around. Um, so yeah, once you get into and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, James, but once you get into the high Middle Ages, like they don't think of dragons as a thing that are still around. That was something that happened in the kind of ethereal past, right?
Yeah, it's a similar idea that dragons were in the past, although in what is really literature, and they knew it was literature, like they knew they were fictional stories, that they were writing in the High Middle Ages in the 1000s and 1100s. You do still see like King Arthur's knights
Mm.
fighting dragons, but they know that they're writing fictional stories.
Right, and I mean, like, it's
They're not
purposefully composed as fiction. Like, it's meant to be a,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Also, while I'm on here, I have a quick, totally random question for you. It's sort of a joke.
Yeah.
Do you know what a millihelen is?
A Helen. I would imagine
Yes.
that's one ship.
Yes, that is the amount of beauty it takes to launch one ship.
Yeah, because
As
Helen is
opposed
said
to
to have had enough beauty to
I've had
launch
enough beauty.
1,000 ships.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was like an internet thing that went around for a few years ago, wasn't it?
It was. It's popped back up because of the Odyssey.
Because of the popularity of the movie. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's good. I like it. Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay. So, yes, we're starting to get Homer written down at the very beginning of the Archaic period. And also the Linear B is lost. The ability to write in Greek is lost. We call this time period the Greek Dark Ages because no new writing was being conducted. And it stops again around the Archaic period when the modern Greek alphabet, or the Archaic Greek alphabet, but still the one that's still in use today with alpha, beta, gamma, so on and so forth, that's developed, and that's adapted out of not Philistine, oh god, it'll say here Phoenician. That's adapted from the Phoenician alphabet. And so the Phoenician alphabet is a much older system that itself is copied from other systems in the region. And Greek is an adaptation of the Phoenician symbols. And then the Greek alphabet goes on as Greeks travel around the Mediterranean. And it is, even though they look very different today, the Latin alphabet that we use is based on the Greek alphabet. Like, it was an adaptation of the Greek alphabet. And of course, Cyrillic is based on the Greek alphabet. So really, kind of like all European writing systems are based on this Greek alphabet, which has its origins in the 800s BCE, and that's when the writing returns to Greece. Okay, so I wasn't going to jump into the Iliad, the Odyssey just yet. What I wanted to talk about was different versions of myth. So, the Odyssey and the Iliad present. I didn't talk about the other author, Hesiod. So Hesiod actually, contrary to Homer, we're pretty sure Hesiod was a real guy because he includes in his writings biographical material that lets us sort of figure out who he might have been. He's also writing like 150 years after Homer was theoretically writing. Whereas Homer's at the very beginning of the Archaic period, Hesiod's more in the middle of the Archaic period. And he has two major works.
Is there a chance that Homer was the more or less the epithet of the oral version, while this individual was might have been the version that translated it over?
No, but that's because Hesiod wrote different works. He did not write. He's not associated with the Iliad or the Odyssey. He has his own books that he wrote.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So his most famous works are the Theogony and Works and Days, and both deal in a lot of mythology. But Works and Days is more kind of like describing why are things the way that they are, and it kind of gives some mythological explanations, some naturalistic explanations, but it's this is also the earliest attestation of the Pandora's box. The Pandora's box story is in Works and Days, but Theogony is much more interesting when talking about versions of myths of gods and heroes and so on, because the Theogony is a story of the origins of the universe, and so it goes through the genealogies of the gods, the you know, kind of like if you, again, to make the parallel with the Hebrew Bible, how numbers is like so and so begat so and so, so and so begat so and so, and your eyes glaze over and you're wondering, what the hell am I reading? So that is important in ancient Israel society because it's very important to trace your lineage. It's very important to kind of get that hammered down so that it justifies your position in society. This is a genealogy less for justifying your position in society and more just to organize the universe so that you understand what gods are related to what gods and why. And it's really interesting because this is the earliest attestation of a lot of these narratives, and they're different from the more popular ones. And like for instance, Cerberus is in the Theogony. This is the three-headed dog that guards the underworld. Except he has 50 heads. He doesn't have 3. And there's other variations. There's other different things. I think he has a host of snake tails as well. I taught the Theogony, and it was very important to me to teach the Theogony because it has different narratives, and it's the earliest one that we have. And very, very often you will hear people say, well, I just go with the original because it's the right one. And more often than not, it's not the original, it's just the first one that they read. And again, going with my first my first exposure to mythology, Ray Harryhausen stuff, man. So there's not a lot of real mythology in the strictest sense. He doesn't follow the traditional canon laid out. He kind of goes his own way. And then failing that, the Hercules cartoon. So I taught this because I thought it was important to emphasize the earliest version of a myth may not accord with what you think of as like what it should be, and that's okay. That's totally okay, because in the ancient world, all of these different versions existed side by side, and nobody gave a shit. They just told stories about gods and heroes and the way that they fuck with people, and nobody paid too much attention to, oh well, like this one can't exist because it's newer, or it changes the narrative, or he's called Heracles, not Hercules, or like nobody gave a shit. They just didn't. In Greek, he's Heracles because that's his name in Greek. In Latin, he's Hercules because that's his name in Latin. Sometimes authors will actually draw the distinction where because they'll talk about Hercules and Heracles as different characters, Latin and Greek, not earlier and later, just this is the Latin version and he does things over here, and he has these myths associated with him, and in Greek he's got these myths, and for that author, that's how they make sense of the world. But for another author, Heracles is Hercules, is it's all the same thing. And to drive that point home, what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about these are different books that I wanted to talk about, but I wanted to talk about Spider-Man. So in my class, I put out a poll and I said, "What's your favorite Spider-Man?" I don't know if we can. I mean, I can make a poll actually, but I don't know if anybody cares. I just want you to think about your favorite Spider-Man. Whether that's like a comic run, so like if you were a big fan of the original Steve Ditko run, or one of the later authors, that's your Spider-Man, that's Spider-Man for you, or whether it's one of the movie series, whether it's the Raimi movies or the Ultimate ones, or the Tom Holland ones later, or something else. But just think about that, and then look here and see that there are a lot of Spider-Mans. And for everybody on Earth, one of these was the first one they saw, and like for them, that's Spider-Man. And to drive the point home, I showed my students the honest trailer for Japanese Spider-Man. So Japanese Spider-Man was a product of Marvel trying to branch out, and happened in the 1970s. And actually, there was a Spider-Man TV show on American TV at the same time, and it's way worse. But Japanese Spider-Man, just to give you an idea, he got his powers from an alien. Very Hal Jordan, Green Lantern style. Like, okay, I choose you. You have the powers of Planet Spider. He uses a gun to shoot people, and he fights in a giant mech named Leopardon.
Nice.
Does it not have an image of Leopardon? There you go. So that's just make it bigger.
Oh, it's Voltron.
Voltron, Power Rangers, this is actually the kind of progenitor to the entire tokusatsu genre in Japan, as far as I know. And so, yeah, that's this is Spider-Man to an entire generation of Japanese kids. And it's not, fake Spider-Man or Japanese Spider-Man or different. It's just Spider-Man. And then when they see American Spider-Man or look at comics or movies or whatever, then now that's the variation in their mind. Now, this was on TV 50 years ago. So I don't know how popular it is today in Japan. But, I mean, he drives around in a giant mech. Like, that's pretty sweet. I thought that was pretty good. And the honest trailer is worth a watch if you've not seen it before. I might put the link in the chat if
Please do.
okay. I mean, I can actually just get the link right away. You can see what awful things are on my there.
Oh, your YouTube recommendation.
Yeah. Japanese Spider-Man. Actually, you know what? Let's just watch it, and I'm gonna pause the recording. Unpause.
I'm actually staring at another version of it where there is a actual Spider-Man comic that does go into kind of that world, but there's it's more all mech robots.
Yeah, apparently Stan Lee loved the Japanese Spider-Man adaptation, and they brought it into the like regular comic many years later. But they did bring it into the regular comic series, which I think is great. I think it's great. So that's the mindset that if I can kind of impart to anything to you folks, that's the mindset that I want you to walk away from, is that there's no right version of a myth. There's no wrong version of a myth. There might be an original version, or at least an earlier version, but that just means it's been around longer, because it's there's these just endless permutations. And to kind of give an example, most of the myths that we know of when we think of ancient Greek myth, remember, emphasis Greek myth, most of the ones we know of are from the Roman period. There is a text called the Bibliotheca, and it is written in the 1st or 2nd century AD. It is written in Greek, if I'm not mistaken, but it's from the Roman period. So it's a Greek author, but writing in the Roman period in Greek. And many of what people refer to as like the canonical myths are contained in the Bibliotheca, or in the Metamorphoses, which is a Roman author. This is written in Latin. It's Roman author Ovid, and this is a series of metamorphoses or transformations, and so it's a series of it says here 250 myths, 15 books, and just shy of 12,000 lines. But this is a lot of there's a lot of shape shifting in ancient myth, and Ovid kind of collected all these shape shifting myths and told stories about them and kind of made allegories, allegorical inferences from them and so on. But these are both Roman era authors. One of them writing in Latin, but about Greek myth, and so um, it originality and the right version really fall by the wayside when you start looking at it. Even when we talk about, and we will talk a lot more about the Odyssey, but even when we talk about the works of Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, there's something called the epic cycle that I didn't go into, and this is narratives around the Iliad and the Odyssey. These are all lost works, unfortunately, but to the best of our knowledge, they fill in events. This one fills in leading up to the Trojan War. This is the actual the part of the war here. This is after Achilles' death. The building of the Trojan horse, which doesn't even happen in the Iliad. You like the war. I don't know if you guys have ever read the Iliad. It ends before the war's over. The Iliad ends, I think, on Hector's funeral, or just shortly thereafter. But the war hasn't ended yet, and then it just picks up in the Odyssey. Like, oh yeah, that horse was a great idea. Good work, Odysseus. It's not in the Iliad at all. So there's other works that are lost that detail these things, but they're not the only revisions. They're not the only versions of these stories. They just are some of the older ones. And then we also get later works, namely the Argonautica, which details Jason and the Argonauts. That's a Greek work. It is written. The time period is called the Hellenistic period. It's basically after the death of Alexander the Great, his generals kind of cut up his empire and rule as kings in their own right. And in the Eastern Mediterranean, kind of all the royal houses are speaking Greek. So Egypt, Syria, all of these formerly different cultures and so on and so forth, they're all like Greek kingdoms, and so we call it Hellenistic because the Hellenes, after Helen of Troy, but Helen of Sparta, the Hellenes is kind of the collective noun for Greeks, or at least that's what they call themselves. And so the Argonautica is from the Hellenistic period before the Romans come in and conquer the whole territory and the whole region. And then in the Roman period, you also get the oh goodness, I'm forgetting it. What? Aeneid. That's Virgil, right? I just spelt that wrong. But it is Virgil. So the Aeneid, this covers this is a Roman kind of like foundation myth. And it covers one of the heroes from the Trojan side named Aeneas. And as Troy is burning, this narrates the story of him fleeing Troy and later trying to set up a settlement in Italy, which later becomes Rome. So this is kind of the Romans claiming that they are descended from the losers of the Trojan War. But a lot of extra details that we talk about when we talk about the Trojan War comes from the Aeneid, which is again many centuries after Homer's work, but it sort of just fills in extra bits of information. and they all just every new work that gets written, it just sort of becomes part of the mythos, and you like people don't even necessarily reference this character originally appeared in this work. It's now just part of the greater narrative of the Trojan Wars. I think there was a controversy over in the um, the new Odyssey movie over the character that um, transgendered man. Um, what's his name now?
Oh yeah.
I forgot his
Elliot
name.
Page.
Elliot Page. Thank you. The character that Elliot Page played. Like, well, they're not in um, the original Odyssey. Like, no, but they're in the Aeneid, and that's good enough. Like, it's just for the ancient world that would be good enough, because it all just becomes part of the larger narrative, part of the larger story. Um, so these are two of our kind of big works, but I also wanted to include some other ones. These other ones, these were just in case people wanted to do some further readings. The Fabulae includes a whole bunch uh, of myths and the Bibliotheca Historica, more myths. But I really wanted to talk about Paleophatus, because he is what's known as a rationalizing author. And what that means is he thought myths were full of shit and all the supernatural aspects were garbage, and it must have been something else that people were talking about. This guy is one of our earliest authors. He's writing in the late 4th century BC, so he's centuries before any of these other authors. And he goes on to detail how no, of course there wasn't a three-headed dog, you idiot. There was three dogs, each named after a mountain, and his explanations are more improbable than the supernatural mythological explanations, and I love them because he's so confident in himself and he's catty.
Nice.
Let me see if I've got so okay, I don't have any. Let's just turn that off for a second. Because when I taught this last, I've got sections that I can pull from. Please tell me that I actually put some of his. Oh, maybe I did it in the next. Bear with me here. No, it doesn't look like I did, but I have the textbook here. At least I thought I did. Here we go. this. Okay. This is taking too long. I have a PDF of the textbook I used to teach this course. If anybody wants it, it's got all it's all just original myths in translation.
That could be pretty interesting.
Okay, here we go. So, on unbelievable things. They say that centaurs were beasts that had the overall form of a horse except for the head, which is that of a man. Now, in case anyone believes such a beast existed, it is an impossibility. Like, I just love these matter-of-fact statements. The natures of horse and man are not at all harmonious. Their food is not the same, and it's not possible for horses' food to pass through a human mouth and throat. They just eat grass, man. But anyway, so the truth of the matter is this: when Ixion ruled Thessaly, a herd of bulls had gone wild on Mount Pelion, rendering the rest of the mountain range impassable as well. The bulls came down into the inhabited regions and devastated the orchards and crops, along with beasts of burden. So Ixion proclaimed that if anyone destroyed the bulls, he would give them a lot of money. Some young men from the village in the foothills, called Nephili, came up with the idea of training horses for riding, because they invented riding on horseback. And they mounted their riding horses to set off where the bulls were, attacking using javelins. In this way, they destroyed them. From that, the centaur, Centauri, got their name since they had shot down the bulls. Kenta Tanumi Torai. And nothing to do with the form of the bulls, for there is nothing bull-like about the centaurs. So, like, that's just ridiculous. He's got all these specific details. And the reason I bring this up is he's writing centuries upon centuries ago. So this was part of the tradition as well. You know, the part of the tradition is like, here's the fantastic stories of these mythological figures, and also these other authors who was like, it's all bullshit, and here's how I know. And I want to do the Cadmean Sphinx. He knows that one's full of it too. Actaeon. This is a guy who gets torn up. He sees a goddess Diana naked, and she sticks his hunting dogs on him. The truth of the matter is this: he was the descendant of Arcus and a real lover of hunting. He always kept a lot of dogs and hunted in the mountains, completely ignoring his own affairs. People at that time all did their own work because they did not have slaves. The richest man was the hardest working one, and since he paid no attention to his own property, preferred to go to hunt, his life was ruined. When he no longer had anything left at all, the people said, poor Actaeon, he's been eaten up by his own dogs. So he spent all his money on prostitutes.
This guy's great.
Yeah, it's no end of entertainment. But I thought he had one on, maybe it was the Hydra that he had, but I thought he had one on, Cerberus, yeah. Said the Cerberus was a dog with 3 heads. It's clear that he too was from the city he was just from the city called Three Peaks. And the 3-peaker dog is large and fine looking. And that's it. Like, what the hell, man? So anyway, that is one of our authors. One of our authors about ancient.
Haters gonna hate.
Yeah, exactly. So so that's kind of it for the broad mythology stuff. Now I was going to talk mostly just about the Odyssey. Did anybody have any questions broadly about mythology or broadly about the things that I talked about?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can we see your beautiful face again?
Oh shit.
Oh, you're watching the
Oh.
wrong stream.
Oh, I am?
No, you're
Oh.
you're yeah.
I am broadcasting.
I
Okay.
was doing that at first too.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're good, Sean.
Oh, I
Make sure you are looking at his beautiful face.
I should stop the
If you're watching the
stream.
other
Nice.
stream, yeah.
I got it. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Just in case you were
It's good you
wondering.
said something though.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning it. I wasn't. I had the text up here. I was going through it and I was reading. Yeah, I will. I'll upload. Actually, can I upload a file? One moment. There. That's the textbook that I did for the course. So if anybody wants it, it's right there. Any other questions on mythology, kind of broadly, or anything that I talked about? Was anything unclear? You'd like it fully explained or explained better? No? Okay. So we can go into the Odyssey. I just have to put these in here. So the Odyssey, the Trojan War itself takes 10 years, and the various war parties all leave victorious after they've plundered Troy, and go to head home. And Odysseus's journey, he leaves with his own crew. Everybody dies. Spoiler alert, except for Odysseus. And it takes him 10 years from then. So by the time he gets home, he's been gone for 20 years. He is king of Ithaca, which this is a map of. Let me just zoom this out a little bit. Apparently not. All right. I will not save it. Okay. Anyway, Ithaca is a tiny island way over here on the west coast of Greece. And Troy was a city way over here on the west coast of Asia Minor, modern day Turkey. And so Agamemnon was king in Mycenae, which is here. And his brother Menelaus was king in Laconia and Sparta down here. So, but these are all the Greek kind of areas that heroes are said to have come from. In the Iliad, there's something called a catalog of ships, and this is actually the thing that's most similar to numbers in the Hebrew Bible, because people have used numbers to kind of try and reconstruct ancient family groups and understand people where they come from. And the catalog of ships is used in much the same way, where they're trying to understand population sizes of these ancient Greek regions based on the number of ships that they send in the Iliad. But of course, we don't know exactly when the Iliad was composed. So, and even then, is it making reference to what the population might have been then, or is it an ancient population? Like it's fraught with all kinds of problems. There's really nothing. There's not a whole lot of solid data you can get from it. But anyway, these are all areas that are said to either be part of the journeys associated with the Iliad or the Odyssey, or part of the contribution of ships and men to the Trojan War. I actually have also seen What's the one? I think this was the. Is that the nicest one? Oops. That's not what I want. That's what I want. Stupid WebP. Oh, it's not very high res, but so here's Troy, and the journey of 10 years starts here. They take off, and each one of these is kind of one of the narrative points along the way. And one of the things I noticed, so I was watching the movie, and one of the things I noticed right away is Odysseus starts telling his story to Calypso. But that's not how it happens in the book. But most of the mythological adventures are Odysseus regaling people of his journeys. So let's see, they oh yeah, this is where they ransack a town. And the island Cyclops, and where it's 8 underworld 10. So sirens, where island of the sun. That's Calypso, and then this is okay. So most of the story of the Odyssey is actually taking place here. This is very close to the end of the journey. Odysseus, after escaping Calypso, washes up on shore and is taken in, and he's regaling all of these events that happen all over the Mediterranean to the people here, and then eventually says, like, I gotta go home. I gotta go see my wife, and I gotta. There's some guys I gotta murder. So the broad story of the Odyssey is Odysseus sets forth through some mishaps. They end up on the island with a Cyclops. The Cyclops is the son of Poseidon. His name is... Why can't I remember it? Polyphemus. Here's some wonderful art of Polyphemus just, hanging out. There's one eye. This is in more modern stuff. I think this is this a Bernini? Oh no, 1st century AD. This is actually ancient. But some of his men go with him. They get caught in a cave. The Cyclops keeps eating his men, and then Odysseus tricks the Cyclops, eventually escaping. He told the Cyclops his name was Nolan, and so the Cyclops shouts out, "Hey, no one's attacking me!" And the village people are like, "Okay, Polyphemus is clearly possessed by some kind of weirdo. He's running around screaming, 'No one's attacking me.' We're just gonna leave him be. Let him hang out on his own." And Odysseus gets back to his ship with his remaining crew, and they flee. And he says, as they're fleeing, "Hey, moron, my name's Odysseus, and you just got owned." and you can eat shit and die. And Polyphemus is like, hey dad, make his life miserable. So Poseidon is he controls the seas, and instead of basically going and getting home to Ithaca, they're blown off course and have all of these horrific mythological adventures, losing crew members along the way until the point when they're all dead by the time he gets to Calypso. A bunch of these adventures include the island of the Lotus Eaters, where they just want to hang out and eat the lotuses and not go anywhere. Oh, this is the Cyclops here at 5. Oh, they did the Lotus Eaters before the Cyclops? Apologies, I am rusty on the Odyssey, and I tried listening to the audiobook, and it's narrated by Ian McKellen, the one that I was listening to. So it's very very entertaining. But being the idiot that I am, I wanted to just go through it all the way. And the exciting stuff doesn't happen until like book 9 or book 8. And I got to like book 5 or book 6, which is it's like the Hobbit, or sorry, the Lord of the Rings, where Bilbo not Bilbo, what's his nephew? Frodo. Frodo won't actually leave town for like 20 years. And Gandalf is like, this is a really important quest. We really need you to go. So in the beginning of the Odyssey, Athena comes to Telemachus, the son of Odysseus in disguise, and is like, your dad's alive. Go find him. Because I guess I should narrate why. Why is that important? There are a series of they're called the suitors. There's a series of men in the house of Odysseus, all wanting to claim his throne. And there is the idea that Odysseus is dead, and so his wife should remarry. And Telemachus, who gives a shit about him, he doesn't get to inherit. Others should get this crown. And these suitors are eating all of Odysseus's food and drinking all of Odysseus's wine, and essentially bankrupting the kingdom by this constant feasting. And they're very disrespectful. They're and very presumptuous. And this is not well taken. But, and I have 4 Greek phrases up here. And they are taking advantage of a Greek concept called xenia, which is translated as guest friendship or ritualized friendship. The idea is that you must be hospitable towards foreigners when they come and visit you, because, I mean, on the one hand, it might be a god in disguise, but also just that's the law. Like, you don't mistreat those that come to count on your hospitality. And so even though these suitors are being dickheads and really, really pushing things, technically it would be a violation of xenia in order to kick them out or kill them. And they go over this a little bit. They don't use xenia or anything like that, but they kind of go over this as Zeus's law in the movie, the Nolan movie. That I much I got in the opening sequences that I watched, and they do a really good job of painting the suitors as just assholes. So I did like that. That was exciting. And so so the Odysseus doesn't know that these suitors are in his household, eating all of his food and drinking all of his wine and trying to take his kingdom. But he suspects, because he's been gone, and men are men. Something that I didn't cover really earlier, but I should cover. Greek heroes are not heroic in a modern sense. Every single one of them is a bad person in our modern moral system. They murder, they cheat, they steal, they're abusive towards women. Even the nice guys are abusive towards women. Um, like, this is a very different world from our world. And while these individual characters may have traits that translate well into the modern day, and we might think like that trait is admirable or so on, generally speaking, you don't want to know any of these guys. You don't want to be friends with any of them because every single one of them is the worst guy you know. But that tells us an awful lot of what was valued in ancient Greek society versus what we value now. A man who would take what he wanted is a valued heroic figure versus a dickhead. So it's just very different cultural values, very different ideas. Odysseus is generally considered like the nicest, or at least one of the nicest, of the Greek heroes, and he starts his journey home by sacking a town. It's just because they had food and he wanted it, so give it here. So, yeah, these are not classically nice people in our sense. Or I guess they are classically good people, just we don't have classical values. Take your pick. And since Odysseus knows what people like him are like, he can suspect that his crown is in danger, his wife is in danger, and his children are in danger. So he wants to get home. And then every aspect of the trip that gets him further and further away from home is kind of putting his family further and further in danger. And the opening of the poem starts with Telemachus trying to understand what's going on, getting his kind of commission to go and find out if his father is still alive. He finds out, he goes to the court of, I think, Agamemnon, and finds out that that his father is still alive. And then we get to Odysseus washing up on a beach here, and then he starts to narrate. He narrates the escape from Calypso, and then he kind of rewinds and starts narrating the various fights. But I guess he doesn't hit. Sorry, I got my times out. So what is this? Strong north wind. It just bounces them around the sea for days, and then they end up at the island of the Lotus Eaters. Okay, so they get lost. They get off track, and then when they encounter the Cyclops, that's when he tells them to f off, and Poseidon kind of curses Odysseus's journey. Then they end up on an island of cannibals. More crew members are lost. Then they go to Circe or Kirke. She's a witch. All women in the Odyssey are like witches, monsters, or both. It tells you another thing about the kind of the values of the time and of the narrative. I guess Odysseus' wife, Penelope. Penelope's a good wife, but that's because she's staying true to Odysseus as he sleeps his way across the Western Mediterranean, and he's considered loyal. Sorry, these people are bad.
Sean?
Yep.
Aren't Circe and Calypso goddesses? Or are they goddesses?
I think Calypso is a demigod.
Demigod, okay.
She's a nymph. It says here she's a nymph. So yeah, she's a lesser deity. And then but Circe is just a sorceress. So she's a powerful mortal with supernatural abilities. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but these lines are like, it's easy to cross. It's hard to put firm boundaries, and part of why he's considered loyal still is what's the? There's some couples they have the, what do they call it? You're like you're allowed one cheat person, and it's usually some like dramatically beautiful Hollywood star. Where like they're like, oh yeah, no, we're monogamous and we're in a relationship, but like, the cheat person is like Matt Damon or something like that. In ancient Greek society, it was just understood that if a god told you to drop your drawers and, let's go, you did. That's there was no, you did not deny the lusts of a god. And it was like, it's kind of that way for both men and women. The um what's the word I'm looking for? Men are at least given the courtesy of it being framed in the form of a question, but it's not a question. At least that when it comes to gods and goddesses, because they'll just do even more horrible things to you if you deny them. So the gods are also terrible people. These are stories for children. They cut out. I heard that in the movie they cut out pretty much all the sex, and I mean definitely for in the children's versions of myths, they cut out all of the very questionable material. But any other questions? Random interjections? I hope I'm not going on too many tangents or boring people, or if there's anything.
No, not at all.
The Odyssey is funny because it seems so random. He's like, first he goes to this island with the Cyclops, then he goes to a bunch of cannibals, then there's a witch, then there's a sorcerer. It just seems like, is there a theme to it? Because it sounds like a teenager who wrote a D&D campaign. Like, I'm not trying to be silly, but it's so random.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, see, and this is potentially an element of it being constructed over time. You can imagine that the Odyssey in its earlier versions had 2 stops or 3 stops. And then in the it's like the fish, how the fish grows every time in the retelling. The Odyssey gets just longer and longer, and and if you were able to, as a rhapsode, kind of harkening back to the earlier parts of the session, if you could like weave in other stories and make it even more entertaining or more exciting, people would like that even more, right? You get either better tips or just more references or anything like that. But yeah, it's almost never ending. Is Werewolf still here? No, he's gone. Okay. Has anybody seen the Nolan movie?
I enjoyed it.
I have
I really enjoyed it.
Okay, you did see it. Okay, so do they go to Circe's Island? Does she turn
Yes.
the crew into pigs?
She sure does.
Excellent. Okay, because when I taught this to my students, I show the clip from Willow where Bavmorda turns everybody to pigs, and I'm like, obviously this is it's just the historical footage of Circe doing it. So if anybody has seen Willow, that's
Dang, I never put that together.
yeah. I have the video clip. I could show it now, but I don't want to pause it again. We're getting on in time. Because I'm terrified of the copyright strikes now. They're coming for me. So they land on Circe's Island. She immediately turns them all to pigs. She tries to kill them all, and Odysseus is given a substance called Molly. He takes some Molly, and is able to withstand Circe's wiles. And did everyone see John Wick?
Yep.
Yeah, towards the end of the movie when John has killed everybody and he's going after Vigo, the dad, in the truck, and the dad's like, "Cool it, cool it, cool it, cool it, cool it." That's basically what Circe pulls. she's kind of like, oh shit, I didn't, you're past my wiles. Cool it, cool it, cool it. What do you need? Hey, can we have we could be friends, and the funniest part is that Odysseus is fine with that. It's like, turn my men into not pigs, and we're cool. And then they have a party. Then they feast. Um, but he has to go to the underworld for a special mission. So they leave the Circe's island and go to the underworld, and there all kinds of really interesting things happen. It's pretty long. He ends up talking to his mom, and the funny part is he's gone to the underworld to talk to a specific person, and his mom shows up, and he's like, "Mom, piss off! I gotta talk to this other guy." And he was told that, like, it's very important that you don't talk to people that are unimportant before you talk to the guy that you need, because you only have so much time with the spirits. And so he basically tells his mom to piss off. But then one of his crew members died on Circe's island, and he didn't know, and he wasn't buried with the proper rituals. And he talks to that guy forever. He's like, "Oh, sorry, dude. I'm sorry we didn't bury you properly. We'll fix that up. Don't you worry." Um, and then eventually he talks to the guy that he needs to talk to, and then he talks to a whole parade of people. He including Hercules. So Hercules is dead at this point. He talks to Achilles because Achilles died in of course during the Trojan War. They go back to Circe's island to get advice, and then the next stop is getting past the sirens, where he gets strapped to the mast so that he can hear the music without succumbing. But all the other men have to put wax in their ears. Then they have to get by the great whirlpool, but it's personified as a beast. It's two of them actually, Scylla and Carbotus. I don't know if these are in. I don't know if these are in the
They're
Nolan
also
movie.
in the movie.
They are? Okay.
They sure are. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because I imagine that would be. I could imagine Nolan making that look awesome. These are not exactly easily identifiable giant monster beast things, but just so you know, the text is very clear that they're women. Throwing that out there. You might be seeing a theme develop. And then towards the end of the journey, or at least what he thinks is the end of the journey, they kill sacred cattle of the sun god. And all the men die except for Odysseus. They ate food they were not supposed to eat. And he washes up on Calypso's shores. She takes him captive, looks like for 7 years. So, yeah, this is a long part of his journey is spent servicing Calypso. He eventually escapes her to this island, to this settlement. They try to get him to marry one of their young daughters and become king, and so on. He's like, no, but I got my own wife and kingdom. But while he's here, he narrates the whole story to them. And then the really violent part comes when he gets home and realizes that somebody's been sitting in his chair and sleeping in his bed and eating his porridge. And with his son, he shows up as in disguise as a beggar. He is treated well. Again, Xenia comes in, reveals himself to his son. His dog recognizes him. This was mentioned earlier in the poem. And then he just fucking murders everybody. Goes through and kills all the suitors in gory detail, and reveals himself to his wife. And I think they live on happily ever after. There's another narrative that he leaves a year later, which is deeply depressing to me. But that's the 10-year journey of the Odyssey across 24 books.
And when he shows up and finally takes on the suitors, it's hilarious. It's like you're reading a Hollywood script. He just like drops his cloak and throws down and just starts murdering everybody. It's hilarious.
Yeah, I mean there are very cinematic aspects to these poems. They were told and retold as entertainment, and you wouldn't necessarily go through every book all the time. You just get somebody to just the good parts, or just one section, or if you're all around a campfire, and as I mentioned, like Bob really knows book whatever, you get him to recount that one. I suspect that the violence of the killing of the suitors was a pretty popular, like action movie to to get people to retell. And then later, of course, once we get into kind of classical Athens, they start writing new plays that are based on these figures, and they remix the myths in plays as well, all throughout ancient Greece. Whenever they're writing new plays, they're changing the myth, they're updating it, they're adding new characters, um, putting in new themes, and again, this is all understood and accepted as part of the process of storytelling. Getting back again to the original theme of storytelling. That's kind of where I've got everything prepared up until. I do. If people had questions about the movie and where it deviates from the text, I was prepared to talk about that, but only if people had questions on it, because I wasn't able to finish watching the movie myself. I can talk about a few things that I noticed, but they're rather minor. One of them being I guess as a relief for his sailors, they start off the journey and say, "Don't worry, pull in the oars. We'll just go by sail." Those kind of boats can't do that. It's just not how they function. You always have to be using the oars. That's just a nitpick, like a historical nitpick. With the sail, you have to oar less. So putting out the sail is a relief for your sailors, just not a full relief. They still have to steer the boat and oar it along. You just get help by the wind. But they did seem to be. I think that I read something that there were like Viking ships were used, replica Viking ships, and they did seem to be more Viking ship than like a bireme or something like that, or ancient Mediterranean ships. But
John, can I make a comment?
of course,
Or it's interesting you say like how much the story hates on women throughout the entire story, and yet Athena, like he can't do any of this without Athena. She's like always at his back through the whole journey. So that's an interesting contradiction, like in the story itself. There.
it absolutely is. And Athena is one of these characters where she is a woman through and through, and yet routinely in mythology and in narratives, not only is she talked about positively, but she's talked about positively kind of as a man. And one of the myths has Athena born out of the head of Zeus, that she has the wisdom of Zeus, and the idea being that she might be a woman, but she thinks like a man. And Athena is one of these characters where um, she doesn't get hate on as a woman, and it's a source of endless fascination for folks that study this kind of thing, depictions of her, descriptions of her, and so on and so forth. It's good, um, insightful to pick up on. Any other comments, questions, concerns that I've ruined something? Apologize if your favorite story now feels a little worse. I love these stories, so I don't want to sound like I'm crapping on them. It's just that we do have to contend with the fact that a lot of it is just kind of awful stuff, and sometimes it's kind of cool, but like a lot of time it's like, oh, I wouldn't have done that way. All right. Well, if there's no further questions, then I'll probably cut her off. If no one has any thoughts about the movie or any comparisons with the poem or anything like that.
Sorry, I haven't seen it.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah,
Seen it in probably a decade.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for coming out. This was a lot of fun. I hope this was sufficient for everyone. I hope it was entertaining. And yeah, I'll have this posted probably later tonight, and we'll start up a conversation about what to do for next month.
This was great.